If it's not fun, why bother?
You're listening to the Logic and Pixels podcast.
All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
Logic and Pixels, episode number 4. Adam, aka askcsradical, here with you guys. Avery, again, not here this week. I am flying solo once more. It is the 27th of December as I'm recording this, which means this is the final podcast of this year, because I'm certainly not calling it a good one. But I figure with this show, it would make sense to kind of cap it off with just talking about everything that I have played or enjoyed over the course of this year. Originally, the following podcast, I was going to do a list of the things that I'm anticipating for 2021 and beyond. But Avery said, when I'm back on the 9th, or whenever we record the following week after that. So from 2 weeks from now, we're going to do that. So I'm going to have to figure out something for next week. So I'm not really sure what that's going to be yet. So yeah, this week is going to be just basically what I've done this year in terms of gaming. And then after that, I'll figure something else for the week after, and then the week after that, we will just be talking about all the stuff we're looking forward to doing in, the next 12 months after. So, this is going to be not in any particular order, aside from roughly when I think that I played these in order. It's not alphabetical, it's not like from best to worst. It's just roughly my timeline of 2020. Now, it's probably not 100% correct, because I barely remember what the hell I did yesterday, let alone 12 months ago. But I think it's pretty damn close, and it kind of gives you a sense of like where I was at, because a lot of people are going to be doing like their awards for 2020, and I know on my VCR podcast, my second podcast, that will be what we do. But our awards are never indicative of the year itself. It's indicative of what we did in that year, because we're not professional reviewers. We're not making a crap ton of money that we can just buy every game that gets released in the same year. So most of what I do every year tends to not actually be from this year. I'm just looking at my list now, and basically maybe like a couple of them actually were. Most of them are games that I'm catching up on, or games that just, I was waiting for a good deal on. Like I even said it in the pre-order thing, like I waited a few months for Spider-Man, so every time something big comes out, I give it some time to get the price down, because I can't just be throwing 70, 80, and sometimes if you're looking for like deluxe editions, even more than that, for games that, I have to be very careful with how much I'm spending. So these are basically all games that I either waited to drop in price, or, I just had in my backlog and just hadn't got a chance to. So the first game, and I was already playing it in 2018, or 2019, I should say, and started getting to the point of finishing it at the beginning of this year. And what is probably going to be my best game that I played in 2020 is The Legend of Heroes: Trails of Cold Steel 3. Now, most of you have probably never heard of this series, and it's probably because JRPG fans are still kind of getting into Persona, so it's, people are still trying to play catch up with that, and haven't had time to start experiencing other JRPGs out there. The Legend of Heroes series is starting to be the new one that is gaining some ground, and while like Persona 3 and Persona 4 I would sell to the moon, and Persona 5 I'm obviously doing as well, as I'm currently playing that. This is basically how I'm capping off the year. The Trails of Cold Steel series have been the new Persona for me, the series that I have gotten into that has been nothing short of a godsend for me, the old school JRPG fan, because there was a period of time, and I'm sure a lot of people who have been playing JRPGs since, basically like NES, Super Nintendo days, the PS2 was like the last bastion of really good JRPGs before it became a absolute shit, like storm of like a muddied fucking ocean of crap, because you had your Final Fantasies, you had, Persona at its best, you had so much stuff out there. I mean, even like off stuff like Shadow Hearts, Suikoden, I could go on, but then on top of that, you had all these blatant, just horribly put together games, usually that were using anime girls to sell the covers, which is nothing that's changed over the course of the last 20 years. But you had like your Magna Cartas and games of that ilk, which just weren't any good. And from then on, I found that, quite honestly, JRPGs just kind of died. The PS3 and the Xbox 360, to my knowledge, but more or less, I guess my opinion, really didn't have anything. Like, the PS3 really didn't go very much because, I mean, all you really had was the Final Fantasy 13 series of games, and in my honest opinion, they are probably one of the worst games in JRPG history, let alone Final Fantasy history. They really took the spirit of JRPGs and kind of pissed all over them. Not to mention the 360 basically didn't have any JRPGs apart from like a couple that just weren't really that good because that console wasn't really marketed towards that audience. It was still very much the frat boy, like first-person shooter, sports, action-adventure stuff. I mean, the best you got for RPGs was like whatever BioWare was doling out. Like that's where I kind of sit on that. So to get into the PS4, now granted, Trails of Cold Steel has been for a while now like a PS Vita series, and the Legend of Heroes games were also on PlayStation Portable, some on PC when they've been getting ported. And that's because the Heroes of the Sky series, or not the Heroes of the Sky, Trails in the Sky, sorry. They were more like old school, like very like early like PlayStation looking RPGs, kind of reminded me of like what Final Fantasy Tactics would look like, or like Breath of Fire and Skies of Arcadia, things of that ilk. But or not Skies of Arcadia, I'm thinking Grandia. Anyways, I'm rambling here. When I got exposed to Trails of Cold Steel, it was like a breath of fresh air. I was like, holy crap, this is like every JRPG that I used to love. And then on top of that, it's got the Persona aspect of it, of the walking around in real life, just kind of chilling with people, having fun, whatever else. Not nearly to the extent that Persona does it, but Trails of Cold Steel is like Persona Light when it comes to that. But what it really did, in the first two games especially, was it pushed a political story and a rich versus the poor kind of story, and actually made it really, and I mean really palpable, really engaging for me. A lot of times when games do this, they don't really do the best job of kind of really like explaining and detailing the actual struggles of it. It's more just rich guy horrible, poor guys just trying to fight. There's so much more complexity to it in the Trails of Cold Steel games, and that's the beauty of it, is that it's more than just this guy's evil, these guys aren't. There's so much beyond it. Like, there are some people on the evil side that you're like, okay, they're not that bad, but they're just kind of led astray because of what everybody else is. There's so much more to it. And then going into Trails of Cold Steel 3, where it's starting not necessarily a new arc. Actually, well, it is a new arc, but it's like a new chapter. It's still engaging a lot of what happened in the previous two games, but it introduces a lot of new people into the fray, including a lot of people from the other series in the Legends of Heroes franchise as a whole. I mean, you're getting people from Trails in the Sky, you're getting people from the Trails to Azure series. So it's another thing that I do appreciate about it, even though I have no real knowledge of the previous series before Trails of Cold Steel. I've done a little bit of research to keep up with it. I've seen so many people say that you can't play the Cold Steel games without playing the other ones, and I strongly disagree with that. You may struggle to understand everything that starts to happen, especially in 3, because that's when it really starts to dig into the older stuff. But it's not terribly difficult. You just probably need to watch a couple of YouTube videos that summarize it, and you kind of get the sense of some of these characters. And I've caught up that way. The game itself, really, like, I already enjoy the battle mechanics of 1 and 2, but 3 made it so much more easier to use. And obviously, when it's specifically made for PS4, it's a lot smoother. Things run very, very well in comparison, because there are moments in Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 where, because it's on Vita, it cannot handle some of the cutscenes. There's too much going on, so it definitely drops in frame rate. It doesn't happen at all in PS4, and I can't wait to see what it looks like on PS5 when I play Trails of Cold Steel 4 on that, with the SSD running it a lot better. But the battle system is so much more improved, and with a just absolute massive cascade of characters, there are so many people that you can gravitate towards it. You definitely don't feel like there's somebody that isn't for you. And in fact, it's really hard to not find like people that you can count on more than one hand that isn't for you. So to flood all that together, the one big thing about the series that really, really got me was the story. like I said, the political aspects of the story in the first two games are really good, and what the third one really capitalizes on is the emotional value of it. There were points in that game where I was absolutely soul-crushed and angry and just feeling miserable because it really does show just the evils of, like, I guess, like, basic people, the evils of the, you know, the upper class, and all the things that, like, me as somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck in a world where, right now, obviously in 2020, I mean, it wasn't pandemic era when I played the game, but it was still pretty rough because obviously we still are going through a lot of political strife in this world, even before the pandemic hit. So a lot of the things that Cold Steel 3 does just kind of brings me back to all the things that I'm just really annoyed at, and it really, really got my emotions up, and by the point of the end of the game, I was soul crushed for a number of reasons, and then knowing that we have one more game left where everything comes to a close, and you know that everything's picking up at this point. Like, it's just, I haven't left a lot of games being that, like, holy shit, I can't wait for the next one. Now, granted, a lot of people are probably thinking, well, shit, you haven't bought the new one yet, and it's been out for a few months now. Why haven't you? Well, that's because I want everything, and $110 is not exactly easy money to come by if you're me, so I have to wait a little bit longer. Also, my backlog, again, like I said, has been pretty crazy, so. But Trails of Cold Steel 3, if you're a JRPG fan, you need to check out that series as a whole. And Trails of Cold Steel 3, in my opinion, I keep saying to my opinion, which is just not sensible. Trails of Cold Steel 3 is one of the best JRPGs I've ever played. I would put it in my top 5 of all time, without question. That being up there with games like Persona 4 Golden, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy VI, and Chrono Cross, I think, would be like how I round up my 5. Now, the order is interchangeable, it always changes, but this game really left a mark on me, and I truly do, looking at my list, believe that this is my best game that I played all year. And it's got some pretty good company with it, so that really tells you what's going on with it. So, moving on to the next thing. I needed something to play, you know, and nothing was on sale at that point, so around that time, PlayStation Plus actually came out with something interesting to try, and that was Uncharted 4. Now, I will say from the very beginning, I do not like the Uncharted series that much. I will say that the first game is horrible. I hate the first game. It is very, very bad, in my opinion. It's not fun, because it's just so much of a shooting gallery that it feels less like you know, trying to fight your way out of something, and it's just you trying to survive, because unless you get to a certain point, the waves just keep coming, and I hate that part about games that do that. It's just respawning enemies till you finally hit a certain point on the map, and it's like, okay, you've advanced enough. I'm like, I hate that. There's no way that you have this endless army ready. That kind of mechanics I hate. And then on top of that, because I've played the entire trilogy as well, because I had the Nathan Drake collection at one point, and I needed to play something because I didn't have internet where I was at that time, so I needed something I could play offline, and that just seemed to be the best one, because everybody told me how amazing the series was. Uncharted 2 was always told to me to be the best game ever on that generation, and I played it and went, really, that was it? That was the best game? And I'm not saying it was a bad game, it was okay, but I'm sitting there being like, this isn't that special. And maybe it's just because I played it way in the future where I don't obviously enjoy the mechanics nearly as much now because I've enjoyed better games like that, but didn't really care for that much. And then 3 was more of the same. I'm like, okay, this just really isn't doing anything. So when Uncharted 4 came out, I'm thinking ahead of time, like, okay, this is probably going to be more of the same. You know, maybe it's going to be a little bit like better just because the graphics will be better, it's going to run a little bit better, and maybe they'll have improved things, you know, with the new hardware. I apologize if I sound a little bit weird. I think I have like a hair in my mouth and I can't friggin' locate it right now. But when I started playing it, same kind of thing. I'm like, okay, this is about more of the same of what I got and whatever else. And then as soon as it really started to open up and you really started to get into the meat and potatoes of the game, I started being like, holy crap, like this is actually really good. And by the time the game was over, I went, wow. Is it just that I don't like the archaic gameplay of the original series, or did they just nail the story a lot better on this one? Because for whatever reason, the sense that I got playing 4, compared to the other 3, was just a sense of just overall fun. Like, I just felt like I was enjoying myself rather than being bogged down in this game of you against a massive army of enemies, or you know, against this evil Russian, like, action, like, cheesy, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger level action hero kind of stuff. And maybe it also just had to do with the fact that the end point of the fourth game was just fun. Like, just the dungeon that you were trying to find, or the treasure you were trying to find, and the stories around that, and just the scope of some of these worlds. And it just, I don't know. It's really hard for me to explain why suddenly that game was better. It just feels like everything kind of hit me better than all the other games did. Like, the gameplay is definitely a lot better and smoother. It's not nearly as gallery-ish, obviously. I felt like there was a lot better dialogue in this. I felt like the maps were a lot better. I felt like even the story was just a little bit more fun to get into. So who knows? It might just be a an ability of having 4 games to figure out what this game's true identity is. It could just be that it runs so much better on PS4 that I don't notice the archaic like gameplay that was in the original trilogy. I don't know for sure. All I know is that Uncharted 4 was a fantastic game, and I was not expecting that when I played that. The next thing I would get onto is a game that I had played very, very little and have gotten into a lot more over this year. And it's also been great as a replacement to a series that obviously we're hoping to see come back in a game like Back 4 Blood. But Killing Floor 2 has been probably my favorite overall multiplayer game to have in the entire year. It is a game that really doesn't require much from you, and yet is just some of the most super chill and super chaotic fun stuff you can do. And I know that sounds weird to say chill and chaotic at the same time, but that's really what it feels like. Because despite how absolutely bonkers Killing Floor 2 can become, because it is really just like a zombie mode game where it's just horde after horde after horde, especially if you're playing endless. It's really just a game that's like, you go in and you just play. Like now, like I play with a bunch of my friends and we just go into endless and we just play until it's done. You know, and sometimes that can be an hour, sometimes that can be a couple hours. And just doing that, it's just super chill. It's stressful at times, but it's the fun kind of stressful. It's not like, oh my god, this is too hard. It's just, oh my god, like you get to that point where it's, okay, this is just way too much. Like, we can't handle this. We're not good enough for this. And it also just has like so much aesthetically going on for it. The designs of the map are pretty neat. The enemies are cool. I wish they would add more bosses now. I think the fact that they're still the same bosses as this game has been around for a while is kind of disappointing. I wish they'd add more. But the biggest part is the music. It's like when you play Doom and you just get so into the game because the music is just fucking killer. Same with Killing Floor 2. You know, it's so awesome to be surviving and just wrecking zombies with some of the coolest music, like some of the heaviest metal, like crazy good music that you can hear. And it just keeps that vibe going. And as we have been playing that game over and over again for about a month and change now, like, it's still not boring. We enjoy every time we play it, and it doesn't get old. Now, there's going to come a point where we play something else. It's just an inevitability. But as it stands, like, this isn't a game that, like, I'll turn on and be like, oh, I guess we'll play more Killing Floor. No, I don't think I could actually get bored of this game unless I was playing it every day, because then that's a little bit different. But because we're playing it once a week, it's a pretty good time. You know, you just have fun just destroying shit. And, you know, in a time where everything is miserable, just to have a little bit of fun is always a positive. Next up, Yakuza 6 Song of Life, finally catching up completely on the entire Yakuza series, as Like a Dragon was coming out a couple months ago. Another game that I'm still waiting to drop in price enough that I can take a crack at it. Although I guess with Yakuza 7, it's going to be a whole lot different because it's going to play more like a JRPG than the traditional Yakuza series, which is basically a beat-em-up. So again, if you're unfamiliar to Yakuza, you should not be ignoring this series. Like, the fact that you have gone this long without getting into it is a shame, in my opinion. Unless you just don't like beat-em-up games, or unless you can't get past, you know, games that aren't in English, because the Yakuza series as a whole is all Japanese voiced. there's no, it is an insult to yourself if you're not playing these games. They are some of the most fun games you will ever play. Some of the wackiest shit you will ever play. Now, if you haven't played the series before, start with 0. Work your way up to Kiwami 1 and 2, because that's the the remakes of Yakuza 1 and 2, because the original games were PlayStation 2. And then 3 to 5 are redone. They're remastered from PS3 games, and Yakuza 6 is the only one that was a PS4 game before Like a Dragon came out on both PS4 and PS5. I don't know what happened here. I hope this didn't get screwed up because my computer randomly turned off like it was about to go into sleep mode, even though I'm actually using stuff. So I am going to quickly make sure I am running something on both monitors so that this doesn't happen again. So my apologies if anything sounds a little bit off here, but I'm going to keep going back on about Yakuza. Yeah, if you've never played a Yakuza game before, yeah, it's a real shame because, like I said, it's some of the craziest stuff you'll ever get. I've explained it to people as being a series that has some of the most serious, dramatic, intense stuff that you will ever watch. You will ever play. Some of the craziest, intense stuff where it's just telenovela level drama, heavy fucking shit, and it's just crazy, and some of the most dark stuff too. And you'll go from all of that and get into some of the wackiest, dumbest shit, and I mean dumbest in the best way possible. Some of the weirdest stuff you'll ever see. I've always told this story because it's my favorite one. So in Yakuza 0, the prequel to the entire series, and is now a great starting point because not only is the gameplay really well refined, so you're not getting an archaic version right away, it really is probably the best game in the series right now. It's just, everything about it is so perfect. But there's a point in Yakuza where you are a business manager on the side. So where you end up making most of your money in the game is through this. So it's property management. So you buy a property and you let it gain value over time and make money for you, and then eventually you'll keep buying up more properties. And the whole goal is to basically own everything on the map by the time the game is over. And you have property managers that you can do that have certain stats that will enhance certain places depending on where you put them. There's a lot of side stuff you can do as well in the game. There's things like darts, there's shogi, I think there's pachinko machines in that game. I think there's a golf thing in there too, but one of the main things, which I guess makes sense because it's pretty easy to pull off in any game, is bowling. And at one point, you can walk into the bowling alley and there will be this special going on that if you play and you get a turkey, which is 3 strikes in a row, you will get a turkey dinner. And you know that something's going to happen because it can't just be that simple. That would be too easy, right? So when you roll 3 strikes, which actually isn't that hard, it might seem difficult to some people. No, the game makes it pretty easy if you know what you're doing. You go back to the counter, and the girl behind the counter goes, "Okay, well, here is your prize," and she puts a live chicken on the table. And you know how there's that comedy scene where people just keep staring at each other and the camera goes back and forth to them and zooms in closer and closer? That happens. And the main character, Kiryu, who, like I said, it goes through some of the most dramatic, serious shit, is this just weathered, veteran Yakuza member who is just the baddest of most badasses. He just finally stares at it and goes, "Wait a minute. That's not a turkey, that's a chicken." And the girl's like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I'm I think we got a wrong shipment or whatever else. But you know what? I used to work in a restaurant with my family, so you know what? I'll go into the back, I'll kill this chicken, and I'll at least cook that up for you. Is that okay?" And he goes, "No. I'm going to keep him as my pet. And I will name him Nugget." And Nugget becomes a property manager and is actually decent as a property manager. That is one example of some of the wacky shit that you will find in Yakuza. And to pair that together with some of the most serious shit you've ever seen, you feel like it would be a match that just wouldn't make any sense. But for now, having played 7 games from 0 to 6, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that this is one of the best series out there, period. And it is a crime to not be playing those, because unless you just really don't like beat 'em ups, and even then, like, the fighting is actually pretty complex. Like, there's a lot more to it than just smash, 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 smash over and over again. You know, there's definitely a little bit more to it. And not only that, I've also played Judgment, which is a side game where you play as a detective in the same kind of world. And that's also a great game and does a lot of the same stuff too, where it's very serious and yet has some really wacky stuff. All of these games are great. Some are better than others. There are some that just have like a weaker villain, or the story just isn't quite hitting as much. But in terms of the games themselves, they are all enjoyable. All of them are. And like I said, it's a real crime if you don't go and play these. Now, Yakuza 6, just to summarize it, because I don't remember too much from it anymore, because that's one of those games where it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I'm not saying like it's a bad game. It is weird to know that that is a final chapter in Kiryu's story, because obviously if you know Like a Dragon at this point, it is a completely different character. It does finalize Kiryu's story as a whole. There are some pretty good moments in that too. And I also will say that I love the fact that they got Beat Takeshi. I can't think of his full name right now, but Takeshi, if you know from Takeshi's Castle, aka Most Extreme Elimination Challenge, who was Vic Romano in that's Beat Takeshi. And he was also in a Ghost in the Shell. He was the commanding guy, whatever. I can't think of what his name was there, but he was the old Japanese guy that was running the show in that movie with Scarlett Johansson. I'm just trying to think of things out loud that I know that he was in. I'm sure there's a lot more, and people are probably thinking of better examples, but those are the two that come to mind with me. But he's in there, and anytime I hear his voice, like, you know this motherfucker is, like, a badass, even despite what character he plays. But everything as a whole, again, clicks pretty well there. It's definitely, like, not the weakest game in there. I think it's just because there's a lot of stuff that, like, happened in that. It's also the fact, too, that they really do a good job of, like, having you play as different people too, and getting a real sense of stuff. I love the fact that Yakuza in the last couple of games really took advantage of the fact that you can have all these different worlds or different characters and have all these different stories going on at the same time. You know, it's as much as it's fun to play as the same people that you've really come attached to, it's nice to get a different perspective once in a while. And Yakuza does a really good job of that, because it doesn't lose the seriousness or the wackiness that each game has ever had. No matter what character you're playing as, the weird stuff always happens. But my only disappointment with 6 is that they have a baseball minigame in it, and you just get to bat. I wish you could have a full baseball game in the Yakuza series, because I love my baseball. I can't help myself on that. I'll quickly gloss over a couple of things. I got into Infamous Second Son as well. I think that was a free game like a long time back. I just never got to it. I don't mind Second Son. I really enjoyed First Light a lot more, and I'm not sure why. I think I just maybe enjoyed the story of, oh my god, what was her name? I can't believe I'm blanking right now. I know exactly what she looks like, and I just can't think of what her name was. But, it was one of those games where it's more like, it's like an open world game and you just keep yourself busy completing stuff. That was in that point where I was so bored, and I just needed something to kind of complete and just, go in for a little while. And it worked out nicely that way. It wasn't a bad game, but it really didn't do anything crazy. I remembered her name. It's Fetch. Like that was her like nickname in that. I can't remember the main character's name though from Second Son, which is telling you just how much I really cared about him. But I found it really silly by the end of the game. The one thing that I really don't like about the game is the ending. It's probably one of the most poorly written endings I've seen in games in a long time. It really doesn't do anything. Like there's no like feeling of overcoming anything. It's just you defeated the evil person, and then things either, depending on which ending you choose, they either go well or they go really badly, and it's not really realistic of what that story should have brought. But I mean, as like a side game, especially if I got it for free, I can't really complain about it. But I don't know if I would have paid a lot of money for it. Even at $10 now, I'm like, I mean, you might get enjoyment out of just like messing around in it, but it's not like a great game. Another game that I put a lot of time towards going back into was GTA 4, specifically GTA 4. GTA 5 is specifically GTA Online. I used to play it a bunch with friends on PlayStation. I got it on PC because Epic put it on for free, and I had friends that hadn't played it before, so we were doing that a bunch. And this is right around the time where nothing, and I mean nothing, was on sale or coming out. It was just dead period during the early parts of the pandemic. I needed anything. And playing on PC, you don't carry over your progress from console. So I started anew, and I just caught a bug. And it was great too because, you know, listening to podcasts and YouTube videos that are really long and stuff like that, it really helps because it's the kind of game that you can just grind and just do it nonchalantly. By the time that I finished grinding in that game, I had like pretty much everything I could want. And I had caught up on so much stuff that I was behind in terms of podcasts and debates and stuff that I would watch. And I will say it was still fun. Like, we did most of the heists, me and my group of friends. We just didn't get to the casino heist and the Doomsday heist because they were just... Or wait, did we do the Doomsday? No, we tried to do the Doomsday and we couldn't because it was way too damn hard. Or wait, am I mixing stuff up? Oh god, am I mixing things up? No, we did the Doomsday heist. We didn't do the casino heist. The casino heist was too goddamn hard. That was the problem. Because I was the only one leveled up. Everybody else didn't play the game as much as I did. I was like level 170 something by the time we were done, and they were barely like 50. So they definitely didn't have everything that they would need for these much harder heists. And it's a shame too because now they got a new one out with the island that's out there. I think the Capo Island heist or something like that. But it's whatever. I got a lot out of that game. I played that game way too much for the time that I had it for, and you know, it is what it is. Anything that kind of keeps you busy and keeps you from spending money, in my case, was pretty nice. So I mean, if I don't know, can I suggest that game to people now? I guess, but I mean, you have to really commit to it to really get to anywhere. Like, the amount of grinding that I did was pretty irritating, if you really look at it. The amount of grinding that I had to do just to get, like, a small number of things is pretty stupid. But then again, that's how those games operate. Moving on, I started getting into Xbox Game Pass at this point for PC, you know, when I started realizing how good a deal it was, and I finally got a chance to try some games that I've been wanting to. The biggest one was The Outer Worlds. The not Bethesda, the Obsidian guys who used to do Fallout New Vegas, them making their own version of what Fallout is, and they nailed it. Because I didn't like Fallout 4 very much, and obviously I wasn't going to be touching Fallout. Oh my god, why am I blanking on the shitty one? Fallout 76, there we go. I kept wanting to say Fallout first. I'm like, no, that's just the dumb DLC thing that they did, the dumb expansion pass. Outer Worlds was really good, but it was really good without having a lot of substance. Like, as a Fallout game, it was great, but as something that I'll remember, I didn't. There's a great thing that I said once about Wonder Woman, the first movie, which, by the way, I've heard amazing, as I give you quotation fingers, like, so I've heard really bad things about the new one. But the best thing I said about the first movie was that it is the best 7 out of 10 I will ever watch. It was a really, really fun movie to watch, but if you actually pick it apart and criticize things, there's a lot wrong with that movie. It's just really fun, but there's a lot wrong with it. Outer Worlds is very similar. It is really, really fun to play, but there is a lot going for it that just isn't good. There's a lot of things that need to be improved. The most important thing to me, honestly, is that none of the characters really hit with me. Like, Parvati is like the one character that has like any real substance to me, and it still isn't even that much. Everybody else is so, like, I could go without them. I played the entire game basically with Parvati, and I think the Medic Girl was the other one that I did, but everybody else just really wasn't that interesting. The story really isn't that interesting. There's not really like a villain that I'm really going after. But the worlds are all really good. The gameplay is really good. That part was all fine. It's just the engaging part of the game just doesn't really ever hit. And that's kind of like what I said about Wonder Woman, where it's just I can have a great time, but I can also sit back and be like, dude, you need to fix this, and this. And that's basically what the Outer Worlds is. So if you can try it, go ahead and try it. But I don't expect Fallout New Vegas level stuff, because that's what a lot of people went in expecting, and some of them were a little bit disappointed. And the same goes for if these guys ever start making Fallout games again, now that they and Bethesda are both under the Microsoft umbrella. But like, go into the Outer Worlds just looking for a fun game, and you'll get that. Don't look for the Outer Worlds expecting like Game of the Year, which is what a lot of people were kind of hoping for. The best game that I ever played on Xbox Game Pass came with Crosscode, which I expected nothing from. I just saw it. It looked really cool. It was like this weird, like, I guess Secret of Mana meets like sci-fi. I'm like, that looks really cool. So I'll give this thing a shot. And I never expected. It almost beat Trails of Cold Steel 3 as my favorite game this year. Almost. Like, by such a slim margin, Trails of Cold Steel 3 is better than Crosscode. Crosscode does some of the best 2D gameplay I will ever see. With the parkour elements that game has, with the battle mechanics that game has. I spent way more time than I ever anticipated in that game. And to, on top of that, without voice acting, have some unbelievably interesting characters, some really engaging storylines, and some really just emotionally charged dialogue, whether it's comedic or downright like serious. Like, there were some moments where I almost cried, which I don't cry ever really in games. They were very, very, very few times that I've ever cried, especially now because I'm a cold-hearted piece of shit. But jokes aside, I for whatever reason, I don't seem to hit that emotion very much. Because I mean, even in the really horrible year that I've had this year, I still haven't like teared once. So I think it's just like, either it's not something that I'm really either capable of, or I'm just a lot stronger than I give myself credit for. But there were some moments that I definitely was like, oh man. And all of that put together, it's such a fucking amazing game. And the fact that it's still very underplayed, I don't really hear anybody talk about. I know that one of my podcast buddies on the VCR podcast, Jed and Chris, he wants to take a shot at that, but again, backlog. So there's going to be some time in that. I've strongly suggested that to anybody that is even marginally interested in these kind of games. If you are a guy, if you're somebody that went back and played like the old Secret of Mana games or like these old like 2D beat 'em ups, this is literally like the best that you can get in that, in my opinion. And the idea that it's also like a trapped in a video game trope, which I know gets some anime fans really interested, or in some cases, I guess, really annoyed. It really does that whole thing well, and it really engages you with its characters, its dialogue, its story. Everything about it is just so fucking great. And I can't believe how much time I spent in that game. I think I put like 30, 40 hours into that. And for a game that isn't like a traditional, it's not like a JRPG. It's just a really, really long game. And that has a risk of getting you bored really easily. And the only thing I can say is that by the time I got to like the very end of the game, I maybe skipped a few side quests, but I didn't really skip a lot. You know, I still had that completionist mentality of wanting to do as much as I could. And it wasn't like me forcing it. It got to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I've gotten what I want out of this, so let's just actually go have some fun and get through the story and just do that kind of stuff. And I never was disappointed, really. The music's really good, too. Everything about it is just so charming. And like I said, especially because it's not like an overly expensive game, if you find, especially on sale, if you can find it like 25, 33, or 50% off, take a hit on that thing. Like, go for it. It will really surprise you. And it's one of those games that, like I said, I expected nothing from. It ended up coming out with like, holy crap. This game made me believe that I could enjoy indie games again, because for the most part, and you'll notice it with the list that I basically have given you guys, I don't play a lot of indie stuff. I still don't, but I mean, I'm a lot more open to it now. Like, I definitely started playing a lot more demos and stuff to try things. So it's definitely opened my perspective a little bit more on games that are just not automatically like coming up from AAA developers. So that's a big plus. The last thing I will mention from Xbox Game Pass, I didn't play a whole lot on there. I played a bunch of little things here and there, but I never really finished too much. But the last one is Tell Me Why. And I expected going into this game, I said even on the VCR podcast when I was playing this game, I expected to come onto the show and say, I played this game called Tell Me Why, and then start singing the Backstreet Boys just to be like, tell me why I played this game. Because I thought I wasn't going to like it. Because I have this weird relationship with Don't Nod, who are the guys that make Life is Strange for people who can't remember these guys. Some of their stuff is really good, and then some of their stuff is just like, oh my god, like, you guys are just making this story to check off boxes. I really didn't like the second game, Life is Strange 2, and I really didn't get into Before the Storm much either. Tell Me Why, on the other hand, was really, really engaging. Unfortunately, it suffers from the ending being very lackluster, but the first 2 of 3 chapters in that series are really good. The first one especially does an unbelievable job of setting the stage for the story. it gets you so amped up because you think that the worst case scenario is happening. And there's that little bit of mystery that makes you wonder if they're going to go a little bit spectral on it, like a little supernatural. And there's all these like little things that you wonder, like, is this actually happening or what's going on here? And then the end of the first chapter is such a huge like flip of the script that you're like, oh fuck. It just gets that like, oh shit kind of moment. And games sometimes have trouble doing that. And I wasn't expecting it from a game like Tell Me Why. And not to mention, and I know that some people will probably listen to this and be like, oh, here comes the social justice kind of thing. I am so appreciative of the fact that this is basically the first game to have a transgender main character. And one that isn't exaggerated, one that isn't, like mocked. And even generally speaking, like he does go through the motions of dealing with people that aren't familiar with being trans, because let's be honest, in a small town in Alaska, it's not going to be nearly as accepted, but they don't go out of their way to like badger you with people don't like trans people. It doesn't happen. It's more in the sense of like they don't get it, like they don't understand. It's they're still trying to get comfortable with it. And that's fine. I actually saw the opposite. I saw some people mad that they didn't go that route, like they didn't go harder on it. I'm like, dude, like we're not supposed to be trying to make it seem like trans people are like hated. We're trying to make them seem like they're normal. Like, so by making it seem as normal as we can, we're trying to like make it, easier for people. So kind of relax a little bit. But and I was really glad too the Game Awards gave them the Games for Impact Award, because I thought it really needed that. And again, I know that some people will scoff at this, because there are those people on the internet that just can't seem to look past, the fact that every time they hear the word trans, they just think of like the worst things that have happened recently in their bubble. But I really suggest that you take a look at that game and take an honest look at that game. Don't just be like, okay, I'm going to play with the intent of thinking it's going to be like some crazy like political thing. It's not. It really isn't. And it actually has some pretty good storytelling in that. Despite the ending being a little bit meh, a little bit disappointing, it still does a pretty good job of having a game that is pretty chill, because like it's just your simple walk around and do a few puzzles here and there game. But the story is pretty nice. It's very good. It's not like game changing, but it's very good. And it was surprisingly better than I gave it any credit for when I first got into it. As we're getting towards the later end of the year, we get to the last free thing that I got to take a look at, and that was not Metal Gear Solid. That's next on the list for another reason. Fall Guys. And Fall Guys is one of those things that I'm so sad about, because I really do believe that game is amazing, and it just suffers from the fact that, well, it suffers from two things. One, Among Us just got so popular that it took a lot away. Actually, three things. One, Among Us. Two, the fact that just these games can only sustain themselves for so long before people move on to something else. And then three, quite honestly, and this is the heavier one, is that it just PC gamers couldn't take to it because of the hacking. And it's such a fucking shame, because that game is so much fun. It is not a game that I would play a lot. It's very much similar to games like, this is something that I will probably get in trouble for with some people. But I'm going to ask a serious question. How the fuck do you play Fortnite, Apex Legends, or all these kinds of games over and over again for days? I don't understand how you do that. I have played those games a number of times. I can't go beyond like a couple of hours, because after that it feels like I'm just going through the motions again. Fall Guys is a similar way. I can play that game for a couple of hours and enjoy myself, and then after that I'm like, okay, this is enough. I've done my thing. If I really wanted to, and if I wasn't so easily focused on one thing like I can be with games, I would be popping in Fall Guys like almost every day and just playing a couple of games and just being like, okay, I got my fix for the day. Instead, the way that I am is just once I'm into something, I just hard play the shit out of it. I just go nuts on it. Like Persona 5 Royal, I've started like a couple of weeks ago and I'm like 110 hours into. It's just the inevitability with me. I just go nuts on stuff when I get it, and I don't go anywhere else. But Fall Guys was a game that when I did play it, and I hope to go back to it at some point, it was some of the most chaotic fun that even when I was losing terribly, I would get mad, as I have the quotation fingers again. I would get mad, but it was like it was more me being mad that I couldn't do it. Like I wasn't doing as well as I know I could. It's in the same vein that I'm sure a lot of people feel like when they're playing like Souls games, where it's you can do better, and you're just mad at yourself. Fall Guys, even when I'm losing, I have a great time. And it's similar to Killing Floor 2, like I said earlier, where even when it's so much, or it's too much to the point that you know you're going to lose, you're still enjoying yourself because it's so chaotic and fun. Fall Guys, very similar. It's hard not to enjoy yourself in that game. Like, unless there's a hacker ruining it for you on PC, but like when I was playing on PS4 because it was free, because they were really smart to put that free on PlayStation Plus because they knew it would get them a lot of attention. I never had a bad moment in that game. Like, there were rounds of like Seesaw, for example, where you just get mad because like you're waiting for other players to get their shit together and just make things easier for people. But generally speaking, every time I played that game, I would have a smile on my face and I was laughing, especially when I play with friends. I would not suggest playing that solo. I think it's really hard to do solo. Because again, it comes to that thing of like, it's so much more fun to enjoy the chaoticness of games when you have people there to enjoy it with. But I am so glad that these guys at least made their money. And I'm sure they've made a lot more than they ever could have expected to. And hopefully it gives them a chance to do some more fun stuff down the road. And I mean, they're still making stuff for Fall Guys, and I'm sure they're going to be around for quite a while. But it's a shame that they aren't sustaining it just because, it's the way that the industry is. It's still a fantastic game, and I got it. And I finally bought it on Steam to give them some money because I felt they deserved it for what they got, for what they gave me for free, I should say. Now we're getting on to Metal Gear Solid 5 because I had this in my backlog for a long time. I tried to play it like maybe a year or so ago and just it didn't click right away, and I think something probably came out that just took my attention away because that also can happen. But this is right around the time that Cyberpunk was still slated for November, and obviously that didn't happen. And I was desperate. I needed anything because nothing was on sale. I really didn't have anything else in my backlog, and I'm like, okay, Metal Gear Solid's a long game. I'll probably finish that pretty close to when I will be ready for Cyberpunk. And I was right, had Cyberpunk been out in November. But I've never really liked Metal Gear games. This is similar to Uncharted. I've played 1 and 2, and they suffer from the same thing in that everything's too small and it's way too hard on the stealth. Whereas Metal Gear Solid 5 really opened up and made it a lot more accessible to people like me. It's not that I don't hate stealth games. I think just when stealth games are so specific and so finite, it's really hard for me to get into them because I want to play in my way and I'm not patient enough to play those kinds of stealth games. Whereas with Metal Gear Solid 5, I can just go with a silent sniper rifle, pick a bunch of people off before I even get into the base, and then just finish whatever else off there. And I can do that. And sure, it might not be exactly how the game intends for me to do it. I'm still having my fun, and I'm still enjoying the game for what it is. And by the time that I finished the game, I played a lot of it. And there are things that I still don't like very much about it. I think the story can still be way convoluted, but I think that's just Kojima in a nutshell. But all in all, for a series that I've had so much trouble getting into, very much like, even though I finished Uncharted, but that's because Uncharted was generally pretty easy to get into in terms of playing it. Metal Gear Solid 5 really blew my ass away with just the over-the-top fun you can have in that. Because it's more than just a stealth game. You can do so much stupid shit in it. Obviously, having the things like I can't remember what it's called now, but the things where you attach the balloons to guys. It is so much fun for me to try to have everybody like why am I blanking on so many words today? But like sedated, I guess, tranquilized. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. It's so much fun to do all that and then to literally run around the map and play, are you useful or am I going to kill you? And just do that over and over again. Or you have the dog go around and like knife the fuck out of people and have fun with that. Or you have Quiet you just go and say, Quiet, go there and fuck everybody up. And you just watch as people like freak the fuck out and just can't do anything because she just snipes them all down. And then on top of that, like some of the challenging stuff is really engaging. Except for one specific thing, there was the 4 snipers boss battle that you have that I found was really irritating because you basically just had to sit there and wait for lasers to come so you can see where they were. That part was a little bit annoying. But all in all, I had a lot of fun with that game. And I was really pleasantly surprised because I thought I was going to just be like, okay, well, it's probably a game that I'm just going to, play a bunch of just to have a time sink. And I ended up walking out having a game that was really, really interesting to me. Following that is when I got my PS5. And the only game that is PS5 specific that I have played is the one that came installed on it, which is Astro's Playroom. There was a moment in that game, right at the very beginning, where I knew that this was the future, where I knew that this was truly next gen. And that's when they do the thing where they show you what a controller can do. And that's when they I'm holding the controller now, that's when they fill it up and you can turn it to the side and you actually feel like there's things inside the controller moving from one side to the other. All the weird mechanics that thing does. I really look at Astro's Playroom being like, it's not even just some demo. This is a necessary game that anybody who owns this console should play. Not to mention that I think Astro's now is deserving of its own fully fleshed out game. I'm not talking this 2-3 hour experience. I'm talking a full on 10 hour 10 plus hour platformer. This is a game that could be up there with Mario. And I'm not saying that in jest. I'm saying that with the controller tech, you could really flesh this out and have a really fun game. Again, I'm having hiccups right now. Holy crap. What a terrible time for that. It was a game that by the time I was over with it, I'm like, okay, I got a pretty good sense of what's going on. And I was left being like, man, wouldn't it be cool if there were a few more levels? Just a few more. Just a few more. And that's always great. And it makes me wonder what you could do with that if you had a much more fleshed out game. Now, granted, you wouldn't have to have new tech in every single level. You could have a lot of continuations, because obviously you can't just have every level being some new little gimmick to that controller, because that's kind of what the demo was. But so much about that was great. It ran unbelievably well. The feeling in the controller is amazing. There were some moments that blew me the fuck away, and then it's just so damn cute. Oh my god, it's so damn cute and charming. So even and I can't really explain much more than that because it's really something that I can't explain to you with words, because you kind of have to play it and feel the controller yourself to kind of get a sense of it. It's just it really does let you know what next gen's going to be like, at least on this console. Now I know that Steam, for example, they're trying to do as best they can with the DualShock or the DualSense, in terms of making it compatible with Steam. And I can only imagine. Can you imagine if they could fully flesh out the rumbling on this controller with Steam games, with PC games? What a game changer that would be. A lot of people would still be playing with mouse and keyboard, but if you could play games with similar functions in terms of the rumbling, that would so help immersion with a lot of games out there. But either way, we're down to the last 3. And that works out pretty nicely because we're almost coming up to an hour here. The last game that I have finished at this point was God of War. And this seems to be the year that I suddenly started liking a lot of series that I didn't care for before, because Uncharted 4 was great, Metal Gear Solid 5 was great, and now we come to God of War, and I do not like the original God of War games. I am meh on Uncharted, I'm meh on Metal Gear. I legitimately do not like the original God of War games. 100% I don't like them. I think they were just too hack and slashy. There wasn't a lot of substance to them, in my opinion. I know a lot of people really love those games. I'm not saying it to be your opinion's wrong. I'm just saying for me, hated the gameplay, hated the story, hated the vibes to it. The new game comes out, switches up the gameplay. It's a lot more palatable for what I like, which that's just fine. And at least everybody else seemed to really enjoy it too. The story is a lot better. I think it has a lot to do too with it being Norse mythology, which is, I love Norse mythology a lot. I have a lot of interest in that. So there was a lot there, at least, that I could like. And then on top of it, I felt like the vibe that I get from the original trilogy was so angsty, violent anger. Whereas I felt like the new game has a little more chill to it. And it doesn't feel nearly as much of just a pure rage fest, which in 2020 I didn't need. So it was really nice to not have that. So to have a much more, what in my opinion was a much more interesting story, I thought was really, really fun. And the fact that they didn't even really get into the big heroes yet, The fact that, like, you don't have Thor and Odin and a lot of these other things really tells you, like, God of War Ragnarok is going to be fucking amazing. And we'll get into that 2 weeks from now when me and Avery go over all the things we're anticipating. The most fun that I had in God of War, and this is going to be hit and miss with people, is the side bosses. Because I did enjoy a lot of the side stuff as well. There's a lot of fun with the side content. There's a lot of engaging things with it. A lot of the dungeons are really fun. And even some of the stuff is, like, pretty engaging, like, story-wise. Like, even just the little side stuff. But the most fun I had was the side boss battles that were the Valkyries. Where these very challenging boss fights. And I played on easy, and they were still very challenging. But not to the point of, like, they felt like OP or they felt like unfair. There was one specifically that I'm like, okay, some of these attacks, like, I can't properly know what they're gonna do, so I'm kind of guessing. There was just one specifically where I felt like I was guessing the move coming up more than I was like actually reacting. But even then, like, at least the health on that one wasn't so horrible that it wasn't doable. Every other fight felt fair, but challenging enough that, like, I would die once or twice and be like, all right, I'm going to get this fucker. I'm going to totally get this fucker. And I would, and it'd be great. But every single time I felt like I was having fun. I felt like I was being challenged, and not in the way of, like, that's why I'm kind of curious about Demon Souls, but I've heard so many people say too, it's, like, so, like, punishing. So it's why I'm a little bit unsure still. But it's the kind of approach that, like, with the Valkyries that makes me wonder if I really could get into a Souls game again, because I really haven't taken a heavy dive into them. Because I found that, like, I've said it before on other shows, I don't try to play games that I know are going to be really, really hard and punishing to me because I don't have the time nor the patience anymore to push through that stuff. The Valkyries made me at least curious, so it helped a little bit on that front. But yeah, like, God of War, really everything about it was improved to at least my taste, so that I felt like it could be something I could approach. And while I didn't leave going, this game was amazing, I went being like, wow, like, this is really promising. Like, I'm actually kind of interested in another God of War game now. So when Ragnarok finally gets shown off a bit, and when it comes out, I'll be paying attention to when that thing drops on sale, because I can't wait to play that. So that'll be fun. 2 more games to go. I finally, in the later part of this year, got into Among Us. Even though, like, obviously its popularity is still pretty high, but it definitely isn't like the holy shit everybody's doing it as it was, like, in the earlier part of the year. But I finally got into it just because, you know, there was a group of friends that I had that finally wanted to try playing it out, and then one of them had their own side group that was already way deep into it, and they were doing it pretty much on a weekly basis. I need a drink, apparently. I think talking for 50 minutes just made my voice start to go on me. So I got around to playing the game a little bit, and now I play it weekly with these guys, this side group, and it's fucking amazing. It's similar to Fall Guys, where I don't think I could play it all day, but I could certainly play it in chunks and be pretty satisfied with myself. And it helps too because obviously you're playing with people, it's not randoms. I really, really strongly suggest you don't play this with random people. You try to find a group and stay with that group. If you don't have, like, friends that are playing this game, try really, really hard, whether it's, like, on social media, Reddit, Discords, or whatever else. Try to find a group that you can get into and just stick with it, because it's going to be so much more fun when you know the people. Because if you're just playing with random people, especially when it's people not even in voice chat, it's really, really difficult to have fun with that game, in my opinion. Having to play it with friends means that you are trying to figure out your own, like, people you know's, like, intentions. And it's also fun to kind of screw with people that you know, because it's all in good fun. And again, like, anything with friends is always fun, and just on top of that, Among Us is just the perfect game that's built for it. But there are some moments in that game where I am so triumphant as an imposter, and then there are some games where, as a crewmate, I am just dumbfounded. Like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, it's a game that when I lose, more often than not, I'm pretty satisfied with anyway, because I have to give the imposter credit for getting past me. Because there are some games where, like, I have no goddamn idea. I have a gut, but I have no proof. And it's part of the way that I play, because I try to get my task done as quickly as possible, so I kind of lose sight on everything. But it's kind of the beauty of it. It's the ability to just kind of not really know, and to just have the chaotic nature of just trying to survive. And as an imposter, it's similar in scope, where it's like, I'm trying to kill all these people, but man, I gotta pick my moment, because what if I kill somebody and then somebody walks right in? I'm screwed. Because even if I'm able to convince them, like, hey, like, this person's bullshitting, they're just going to be suspicious of me the rest of the game, and I'm probably not going to get much done. So it's just that, like, oh my god, you have to be so careful. And it's that tense nature that makes every game tense no matter what you're doing. And even if you're playing with the same people for like 5 games in a row, you still have no idea, because if you're playing with more than one imposter too, it's a different pairing. There's a different dynamic every single time. So that's a game that, like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be playing this over and over again over the course of next year, maybe even longer than that, depending on how things run. But it's a game that I can easily come back to at any time and just enjoy myself. So the last thing then is Persona 5 Royal, which, like I said at the beginning when I was talking about Trails of Cold Steel 3, this is the game I'm currently playing and getting very close to finishing. I played Persona 5 the original, because Persona 5 Royal is a re-release with a bunch of added content. They'd seem to do this with every Persona game. Persona 3 had FES, Persona 4 had Golden. So basically, they take the original game, usually add a couple of characters in there, add probably another bunch of dates to the game, because the game acts on a calendar. So it adds a bunch more stuff that you can do, and adds probably like one more dungeon. It just adds like a couple more like scenes to stuff. So it just expands. It's like having an expansion pack, although you're paying generally full price for the game, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it still works out, because if you're a big enough fan, you're okay with the cost. And then if you haven't played the game before, you're just getting the better version now. So it works out that way at least. But I played the original and never finished it, and the reason for that is because, quite frankly, I don't think I was in a good place to play that game. I think where I was mentally made it really difficult for me to really attach myself to what was going on. And on top of that, and I'm about to get to that point again, so I'll know for sure, the last part of the game really didn't click with me. And that may just because I was worn out by some of the stuff going on. Because I've noticed, as I've played through Persona 5 Royal, as I am currently finishing the last dungeon before I get to the point in the game that I was stuck at and stopped, every dungeon has meant so much more to me now than it ever did. The only dungeon that I really remember taking issue with, like having like an emotional attachment to, is the first one, because again, it's really horrible. It's really horrible, because each dungeon is a villain's distorted desires, and all of them are pretty bad. The first one is really bad and really relatable, because it can be pretty close to home, and it's an issue that we don't like ever to begin with. And I won't spoil it here, because I kind of want people to get around to it. But if you've played the game, you know with the first dungeon, like how rough that one is in terms of what it happens before you finish it, and like what the guy's intentions are, like the kind of person that he actually is, that kind of stuff. Like, it's all really, really heavy shit. And I've said it before with Persona games as a whole, Persona is willing to go places that most games would never dare go to. And not only do they go to that place, but they actually do an amazing job at giving it the breathing room and the respect that it deserves. The games will take looks at things like transgender issues, about being homosexual, suicide. It takes stuff like that and doesn't shy away from it, and gives it and puts it like right to the forefront and gives it so much respect, and does a fantastic job of telling you a very good story with it. All these elements come together to make a really good game. And 5 specifically made that improvement on the gameplay that just made this like so hard to go back. I told Jin and Chris on the VCR podcast to get into Persona 4 Golden first, because I fear that if you play Persona 5 Royal, you won't enjoy Persona 4 Golden as much, because Persona 4 is going to feel archaic. Because 5 does so many changes to the battle mechanics and the dungeon maps, the way that you traverse the maps, to the point that like I don't think I could go back to play Persona 4 Golden. I planned on taking another look at it on Steam, but I don't know if I can do it now, because Persona 5 just feels like it's improved so much on that it would literally just be the story of 4 that I'd be reliving, and I've already played through that game like 3 times, so what am I really reliving other than just nostalgia? But as I've played through 5 Royal so far, for whatever reason, everything's clicking better. And like I said, I think mentally I'm just in a better place where I can attach to so much more of it. You know, I can attach to the disgusting nature of the first one, I guess the disgusting nature of the second one, the overwhelming, like, horribleness of capital in the third dungeon, the fourth dungeon in terms of just like personal like grievances, you know, and the fifth dungeon again for more things like capital wealth, and now the sixth dungeon, this one is, I think this might have been where I started to kind of fall off the rails. The sixth one I don't have nearly as much attachment to, other than the fact that I just really like the person whose dungeon it is. So it's like, I need to save this person. I need to save this person. So it's more that. It's less like, oh man, this really hurts the core of my being. Like this one's just like, I gotta save like almost best girl. I gotta do it. Like it's just that inherent nature. But the game has been so much better for me this time around, and going into it also with a guide helps. I know that this is going to get a lot of bad reactions from people, but this is just my honest opinion. If you plan to play a Persona game and your intention is to just play through it once and only once, like if you know that you'll never put this game back in again no matter how good it is, play it with a 100% guide. So it'll tell you what days to do certain things, so that way you get as much out of the game as you can. Because yes, I understand, to those who are going to be mad at that comment, I understand that the fun of the game also comes in to you living it as you would want to. However, this is a 100+ hour game. It is not the easiest thing to go back to again. So for those who don't think they can put another 100+ hours into a game over again, it helps to do the 100% guide, because at least they'll get everything out of it. They'll get all the stories of all the side characters. They'll get all the stuff done, like all the little side things. So they feel like they've gotten everything that they could possibly do, because anybody who has played the Persona games, especially has completed everything in it, you know how important it is to finish all the confidants, which are all the side characters that you can get abilities with, but their stories as well. And some of those stories are really, really engaging. You understand that if these people who play for the first time and don't know what they're getting into, if that they go into this game and try to play it their way and not know to make sure they have personas of the corresponding characters, to make sure that they're not saying the exact specific things to get the best points out of each dialogue tree so that they can get to the next person's level as quickly as possible, to know how to get their stats up as quickly as possible, because certain levels of stats unlock the next part of a person's side story. If they don't know all of these things, and it's overwhelming, because as a guy who's played Persona games for a long time now, they are very overwhelming to new players. To be able to get everything on the first try is so important, because the story, and like I said, you guys understand this, the story is the key of this game. And if you're missing it on so much because you're bogged down in the overwhelming nature of all the things you have to try to keep track of, it really helps to have that guide the first time you ever play a Persona game, to at least go, okay, I'm going to get everything here, and maybe sometime down the road if I play another Persona game, maybe I'll take a look at it. But I'll never play a Persona game without a 100% guide ever again. Because for all I know, with the way that my gaming habits go, the way my backlog always runs, I may never get a chance to go back. The only reason I'm playing Persona 5 Royal is because, well, A, I never finished the original, but because there was more content. And the same might happen with Persona 6 whenever that happens, but I don't want to take that chance. So when Persona 6 comes out, I'm going to wait for people to have a 100% guide done, which will make sense anyway, because I'll want to wait for the price to drop anyway, because I generally don't pay full price. But I want to wait for that 100% guide, because then I'll know that I'm going to get everything I can out of that game. Just in the odd case that I never get a chance to play it again, because I don't want to feel like I missed stuff. And as a JRPG guy, I hate ever missing anything, because the intent of a JRPG for me is to get as much done as I possibly can. But yeah, Persona 5 Royal, apart from all that, has been really, really, really fun. Definitely a lot better than when I first played it, because originally I was going to be like, man, Persona 5 was a disappointment apart from like its gameplay improvements. And now that I'm playing it again, I mean, look, Persona 4 is still much better in terms of story and characters, but Persona 5 is doing a much better job now engaging me than it did the first time. I do think that the side characters in 5 are a lot better. I think that's probably what Persona 5 does best. I will say, though, that most of the main characters, your party members in 5, are not good. Especially the ones you're given at the very beginning. The first two you get, Ryuji and An, they are not good. Sorry, I'm thinking of the first two of like 4 of them. Morgana's fine. It's a cat. You can't be mad at a cat. But Ryuji and An are just either boring or really annoying. And I found that I've had that problem with Persona games in general. Like, the first guy in every Persona game, I've made the joke is as annoying as shit. So, see, now I'm having like every problem right now with podcasting. This is a weird thing. So, as an aside, because I'm pretty much done here anyway. The weird thing that I've always had with podcasting, I don't know why this is. If I talk for too long, my nose will run. I don't know why that is. And of course, now that I'm on video, and that it's just me, I can't just mute my mic and wipe my nose. So I gotta do it live here. It's very strange, and it always gets in the way of shit, and it drives me crazy. I hate that. But so over the course of the podcast, I guess because I'm talking for an hour, it makes sense that I would be needing a drink because, you know, doing anything for an hour straight, you're gonna need to switch something up. But the nose thing is fucking irritating. I hate it. It's like every time I have a meal, it seems like just the heat of something or just like the motions of it, it just makes me run. And I can't stand it. It's one of those things about me that I hate. There's a lot of things about my body that I hate, and my nose is definitely one of them. So yeah, I almost made it through the whole freaking podcast without needing to wipe my nose. And of course I had to do it just at the very end. I was so upset when I'm like, I can't ignore it anymore. I have to do it. But yeah, Persona 5 Royal. Really, really fun game. That's everything that I've pretty much played this year. There are a few things that I played like sparingly. Like I could have talked about Cyberpunk, which I don't really want to because it's disappointing. I could have talked about Jedi Fallen Order in the hour that I played it, but I would just be saying how much I was bored by the game. And I didn't want to like go through a bunch of negative stuff. I just want to have fun talking about the cool things that I played. So, and these are all basically games that either I have finished or are ongoing, but I know I'm going to keep playing. So that would be things like Among Us and Fall Guys potentially, and Killing Floor 2, I should say. And then obviously Persona 5 Royal I've finished. I might actually finish it before the year's done, and if I don't, it'll be literally at the tail end of, or not the tail end, the very beginning of next year. So, next week I'm not sure what I'm going to do at this point, because now my plan was to do 2021 anticipation, but now that Avery wants to do that, it makes perfect sense that we're going to push it back to 2 weeks. So next week I'm not really sure what it's going to be yet. Maybe if there's a story that comes out, I might do something. Otherwise, I'll just have to think of something on the fly, I guess. But other than that, thank you so much for checking out this podcast, guys. So, as per usual, if you're listening to this on any audio service, whether it be Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or any other place that you can find podcasts, please, if you can give us any sort of a rating that's possible, please do so. Also, share that with all your friends. Same goes for YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to my channel for more stuff. There is basically just this podcast and the VCR podcast right now. That's the plan. Moving forward, I'm trying to do other stuff, but like just it's so dead right now that there's not really much to talk about. And other than that, like the video, and again, share that with all your friends. And if you have anything to say, just comment below. Like, what have you been doing all of 2020? There's a great thing. What's been the big thing for you this year? Stuff like that. I'm always happy to answer stuff in the comments below. So with that being said, thank you so much for checking out Logic and Pixels here. And we'll see you hopefully next week when I have something to talk about, because I have no plans at this point, which is horrifying because last couple of weeks, just other than Cyberpunk's horrendous launch, has been really, really fucking dead. So we'll hope for something fun to sink our teeth into. So take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your holiday season, and I will see you in 2021. Happy New Year, everybody.